Good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. As Georgia's Secretary of State, it's an honor and a privilege to serve as Georgia's Chief Elections Officer to ensure a secure, accessible, and fair election process for every eligible voter. This year, the Georgia General Assembly passed House Bill 454, which allows the Secretary of State to set the presidential preference primary date. Georgia law previously required the state to hold the presidential preference primary on the first Tuesday in February of the presidential election year. House Bill 454 requires that the Secretary of State set the presidential preference primary date by December 1st in the first year prior to the presidential election year, and the date must be no later than the second Tuesday in June of the election year. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the great state of Georgia will hold its presidential preference primary on Tuesday, March 2nd, 2012. My decision to hold Georgia's presidential preference primary on March 6, 2012 protects the interest of Georgia voters. By holding the primary on this day, we ensure that the voices of Georgia voters are heard and that they will be relevant in the presidential nominating process. I would like to formally extend an official invitation to all the presidential candidates to visit our great state to discuss and to debate the issues with Georgia voters, just as they have done in early caucus and primary states for more than a year. Georgia's large number of delegates and are very attractive on the date due to the fact that other states potentially could violate the RNC rules and they will lose half their delegates, and those delegates will then be allocated proportionately. I want to stress that we have committed in good faith by abiding by the rules set forth by the RNC, so Georgia will not suffer a loss of delegates, and I highly encourage the RNC to enforce the rules as this process continues. This demonstrates why I was such a strong supporter this year, along with Governor Deal and the General Assembly, of House Bill 454. This legislation has given the state of Georgia the flexibility we needed to set the date of our presidential preference primary. The bill received overwhelming bipartisan support in the legislature, and it will benefit both political parties not only today but in the future. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. March 6th. Yeah.
Why not bend the rules like a lot of other states are doing and let Georgia have some publicity and some influence in deciding this? Because it may be done by the time the candidates get to Georgia.
Well, I don't believe it'll be done by the time Super Tuesday happens. If you look back to 2008, there was over 20 states that were set to go on that date. Right now, we have 13 to 14, depending on who moves. When you take out Texas and Massachusetts, we'll have the largest number of delegates that are going on Super Tuesday, plus all the states that are going before that are breaking the rules. Their delegates are going to be cut in half. They're also going to be proportioned. So I think when the candidates get to Super Tuesday, there's still going to be a lot left to play out that day, and I believe that we'll be a big part of that process. The other thing is there just wasn't the will at the time with the leadership in the state to break the rules. So if we weren't going to break the rules, I felt like it was best for us just to decide what was the best date we could go on by not breaking the rules and going early in either January or February. And we felt like March 6th was the day to do that, to make sure that, I just like all Georgians, when I vote on the presidential preference primary, I want to have a say in who's going to be our next president, and I want our voters to do that as well. And I believe by doing it as early as possible on March 6th that the race will still be going on at that time. As you all know, we have two local candidates here in Georgia. I know they're going to be here on Super Tuesday, and I believe a lot of the other campaigns will as well. Well, I mean everybody. I've had a big tent when I've discussed this. I think it's important to keep in mind, while this year we're talking mainly about the Republican presidential preference primary, even though there will be a Democratic one going on, in 4 years or 8 years from now, the reverse is going to be the opposite. So I've talked to leaders in both parties. I've talked to leaders in this building, and I've talked to some of our congressmen and our U.S. senators and a lot of our citizens as well as we've made this decision.
Brian, how
Well, right now it looks like there's going to be 13 if you don't count Colorado and Minnesota, because they'll be holding Democratic caucuses that day. There'll be 15 if you do count those two. Now, there's a couple of states that still may move. I don't know what Missouri's going to do. There was some speculation that Ohio may move up. I don't know if that's true or not, but looking at what we know now, it's about 13. And then when you take out, as I said earlier, when you take out Massachusetts and Texas, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of candidates that are going to campaign in Texas with Rick Perry in the race, or Massachusetts with Romney in the race. You know, then Georgia will have 76 delegates. The next biggest that's confirmed would be Tennessee with 58. So we would be by far the biggest state going on that day. Well, I think it depends on how you look at the whole process. I mean, there's certainly an argument to be made for just saying, who cares about the delegates? Let's go early so our state is relevant in the process. But the fact remains that after that, if that happens and Florida does move up and go early, you know, when folks come out of the state, they may get a win in Florida, but they're also going to be coming out of there with not many delegates out of that race, especially if it's a tight race. I mean, conceivably, you could have the front runners that basically walk out of Florida with close to the same amount of delegates, which I think leads us to being in a good spot on Super Tuesday.
Can you explain that, the change in the rule that is not winner take all, proportionate?
Right. And what we did in Georgia was we changed the rule. In the last couple of weeks we did that. The state Republican Party did that. And I think it was a wise move because it gave me flexibility as this process kind of unfolded. Before, if we'd have gone before April 1st, we would have been penalized. But they changed the rule to basically have kind of a two-part rule. And it said if the Secretary of State picks a date after April the 1st, Georgia will stay just like it is now, will be a winner-take-all state. If we decide to go from March 6th up to April 1st, then our delegates will now be divided proportionally. Now, I think there's a good point to be made here that even when we were a winner-take-all state, you still divided your congressional delegates proportionally. So there's about 34 congressional district delegates that would have been divided up proportionally. It wouldn't have been a winner-take-all, so potentially, even if we stayed winner-take-all, other candidates could have picked up delegates in Georgia. The new rule we passed says that of the 42 delegates that you can get that are proportioned through the congressional districts, each congressional district gets 3 delegates. If you win 50% plus 1 vote in a certain congressional district, you get all 3 of those delegates. If no person gets 50%, then the top vote getter gets 2 delegates. The second place person gets 1. Anybody that finishes outside the top 2 in that congressional district does not pick up a delegate. The rest of the 34 statewide delegates that will be available on the statewide vote, if you do not get 20% plus 1 vote of the vote statewide, you're not eligible to get delegates. So if we only have 3 candidates, or even if we only have 2 candidates that get over 20% of the vote on that day, then they will be the only 2 candidates that are eligible for the delegates, and those will be done a portion to the percentage of vote they got. So, you know, if you end up having a real tough race, if several people drop out before Super Tuesday and it gets narrowed down to 2, there's still a big potential for 1 candidate to come in if they do good in Georgia and get a lot of delegates. But on the flip side of that, you also have the potential that if we still have a lot of candidates in the race, like if Speaker Gingrich's still in, Herman Cain's still in, you have Perry, Romney, you know, any of the others, then, you know, all of those people have an opportunity to come to Georgia, play in our state, work hard, campaign hard, spend money here, and pick up delegates on Super Tuesday. I think that's important.
When you were contemplating picking a date for this and kind of weighing the pros and cons of it, did you feel like this is probably the best date, or did you talk about why going later that you thought that was maybe going to jeopardize? As you were trying to raise Georgia's profile, you don't think us from a donor state to
Right.
be a big player in this?
Well, you know, early on in the process, I think there was a lot of support for staying winner-take-all and just sticking it out till April. But the closer we got and the more states that started moving up, When I looked at that and talked to people, I mean, if we were to go in April right now, there would be 22 to 24 states, maybe even more, that would go before us. Most of the people I talked to, including, political science professors and everybody else, felt like, you're really running a risk of the race being over by then. I had looked at other dates in March where there may not be quite as many states going, and going maybe like March 20th with Illinois. That was kind of appealing to me because it would be Georgia and Illinois unless something changes here in the next few hours. But a lot of people I talked to felt like, look, after Super Tuesday, this thing may be done, or it may be narrowed down enough to where, you pretty much have an idea who the eventual nominee is going to be, and it's just a matter of going through the process, kind of like it was with the Huckabee-McCain race last cycle. Well, there's always been that concern with me. Now, I will tell you that I have also talked to, our national committee people. I've talked to the attorney at the RNC and a lot of other people during this whole process. They have assured me that the rules will stay in place and that states that go early will be penalized with their delegates. So that's why I just wanted to encourage them to continue to do that. But I'll tell you this also. I think the leadership, including myself here in Georgia, feels like if those rules are bent and this process gets unraveled again as it kind of did in 2008, then I think you'll see the state of Georgia take a very strong stand in unison next time to not worry about the rules and just pick a date that benefits our state in that process. I think the date we're picking is going to be a great date for our state, and I think they're going to uphold the rules. But that's why I've cautioned them that if they don't, there's going to be hell to pay, if you will, in 4 years. Thank y'all very much.